Welcome to Newark on Newark. My name is Tehsuan Glover. I'll be the host today and most likely tomorrow. But today we have an incredibly special guest in the house, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's Mayor Ras Baraka. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me, bro.
Appreciate it. So, I'm glad we had an opportunity to sit down and have this conversation, talk a little bit about what all is going on currently, particularly with, the water issues. And I really want to have this conversation from 3 points of view. So one is historically, so people can understand like how far back this, has been going. Then the magnitude of it, so people can understand exactly what it is, as opposed to just what a headline might have people believe. And then what's happening now. So like what's been going on in your administration, like what have you guys been doing, especially some of the innovative things that you guys have been doing that folks might not understand or know about.
Right.
So first, historically, if we go back, cities founded 1666, and then,
Right.
Municipality is established in 1800s. It was very common for a long time that, lead was used in plumbing,
Right.
right? So the service lines that directly feed houses and whatnot were made out of lead.
Yes.
And this is common all the way up until, and just feel free to just correct me if I'm getting anything wrong.
Yeah.
But this is common up until the 1950s.
In Newark, 1953. Right.
1953 in Newark.
The government banned it in '86.
Banned in 86. So that's like another 25
Yeah.
years or so
Yeah.
that it was still in practice, but
Right.
not common.
Right.
But many of the homes in Newark predate 1950s.
Yes.
And most of the homes in Newark predate 1980s. So it's an incredibly common thing. But then we can fast forward up now to like in the past, 5 or so years, with the new developments, what's been going on in Flint. People became more conscious and more aware of,
Right.
Water, and not that what was going on in Flint or what is going on in Flint mirrors Newark in any way, outside of the obviously parallel of water.
Right.
But the decisions that were made in Newark aren't the decisions that were made in Flint.
Right. Absolutely.
And the issues infrastructurally are just very different,
Right.
right? Outside of the lead service lines. But can you kind of fill us in on, in the past like 5 or so years, like
Yeah.
what has been
Sure.
happened up until today?
Well, and so it first began with us when so first of all, we test all of the water.
Right.
There's nobody who come in and test the water for
Right.
us. Right. So in 2016, the school system asked us to come in and help them with tests because they were getting like false positives, a read that says one thing here, something
Okay.
that says a different thing here. So they
Okay.
wanted us to come in. We decided to do that. We told them that they had an issue inside the schools, that we needed to figure out what it was. They had lead exceedances. We found out because they had lead, what do you call it, fixtures
Okay.
on the sinks, and
Mhm.
old sinks.
Mhm.
A lot of them mop sinks, but some of them were water fountains as well.
Okay.
And they had to be disconnected. There had to be a filtration system. But the state, NJDEP, as a result of that, made every school system in the state
Mhm.
test their water
Mhm.
systems. And they found out that, throughout the state, they had some of these issues as well.
Right.
They also made all municipalities test their water sources, do all of these things. So we did all of those things. And all this happened because we had a press conference and told people that there was exceedance in the school system.
Right.
At that point, in 2017, we tested again.
Mhm.
And, we tested 100 homes, and I think 11 had high exceedances out of the 100. 11 or 12 had high exceedances. So we actually went to those homes and went to those people, started talking to them about, what it is that they should do. What's going on. We had to figure out what was happening. We still didn't know
Right.
at that time, except that all of the homes were old,
Right.
and they had lead service lines that we knew that they had that in common.
Right.
And we did it again, same result. So finally, we just took a pipe out of the ground
Mhm.
and sent it to the EPA.
Mhm.
And the EPA came back and told us that the inhibitor or the chemical we use to put in the water that most municipalities in the country use
Right.
it was not effective anymore. It was losing its effectiveness, and
Okay.
that gradually it would become completely ineffective.
Okay.
as a result of that information, we knew we had to find another chemical, so we wanted to put an orthophosphate. And what people don't know is Newark has 2 water systems.
Right.
We wanted to put the same chemical that was in the other water system in the Pequannock system. So we started to do that, but it takes 8 months to optimize. So in that period, we decided to give out filters until the chemical actually begins to be effective in the water again. Obviously, when we was testing the orthophosphate to make sure that it was actually working, and it is working, thank God, it's driving some of the levels down. We tested 3 filters. 2 of the filters out of 39,000 of them didn't work. We didn't know what to do.
Right.
We told the DEP.
Right.
I mean, it's a small data set, but based on the information we had at the time, just like the information we had in 2017, inconclusive. We had inconclusive information, so we decided to stop passing out the filters and begin to do water until we find out what happened, and then we did. And the filters are working.
Right.
And so we're resuming the filter distribution again and moving away from bottle distribution.
Okay.
At this time.
I think that was something that I thought was particularly of note. When 3 the filters were tested and 2 of them came back that there were elevated levels, that the filters weren't working effectively. The assumption is that means 2/3 of the filters aren't working right, which is obviously we know was not the case.
Right.
But it reminds me of like people being hit by lightning. Like there's a very slim chance you'll get hit by lightning. There's an even slimmer chance you'll get hit by lightning twice in your life. Yeah. But there are people who have gotten hit by lightning multiple times. So the fact that the way it played out initially, it caused so much alarm.
Right.
And I would imagine that the alarm was not only because 2 of the 3, but one of the things that you guys have been doing, one of the things that you've been doing is being very quick about communicating what's happening as it's happening.
Right.
So it doesn't give folks a chance to kind of posture,
right,
or like create a storm in any way of like propaganda and da da da. You know what I mean? It's like this is happening. It happened just now. We're aware, so we're making you aware.
Right.
But what that also does on the flip side is make people particularly alarmed, because they're so close to what's happening as it's happening that they don't know what's next, and they don't understand that the work is constantly being done to get to the ultimate solution.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Which is to change the lead service lines.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that's the other thing. So I grew up in East Orange, so I remember Newarkers bragging about the water. But the fact of the matter is, so many of us don't quite know or understand what the water system actually is, how it's made up, where the water's coming from.
Right.
The fact that we don't just have one reservoir somewhere and da da da. Like we don't know exactly how it works. And then even down to at a residential level, there's plenty of homeowners. I'm sure that you've been made aware, going through this process, that don't know they own the pipes. They don't know what the water system actually looks like and how it operates. Right.
Yeah.
And they own the house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that kind of gets exacerbated when we look at the amount of people in Newark who rent and don't own their house.
Right.
And the amount of like multi-family units and whatnot. So much of the population are even further removed from being able to affect change.
Right.
And we'll get to this in a little bit, but that kind of speaks to why it was so important for you to create the ordinance that you created. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I do want to kind of shift quickly to the magnitude of it, because I think that's something else that folks don't quite understand. Not only how much water the city of Newark services out to residents as well as residents of surrounding towns,
right,
but what the water issue actually looks like how many people are affected, and because we're so quick in this society nowadays to turn anything into a crisis.
right,
And that word is such a clickbait word, and not to minimize the severity of lead in the water, but when you say Newark has a water crisis, and Newark is almost 300,000 residents strong, the assumption would be 300,000 people
right,
are in danger.
right.
So can we talk a little bit about the magnitude, like how much water is being fed out, how it's done with the two water systems, and then as far as the findings and how much lead had been found in waters in certain pipes, like where does that sit in the larger scope? You know what I mean?
So the city of Newark is about 25 square miles. The reservoirs that we own are about 70 square miles,
Okay.
about 3 times the size of
Right.
the city of Newark itself. You know, we have 2 reservoirs, one in the Quantic system, one in the Wanacue. They're in protected area. It's outside of the city, about 30 miles outside the city, in like wooded area,
Right.
you know, out there. And the water moves by gravity.
Right.
And we have millions of gallons of excess water in those reservoirs. When the state has a drought, Newark doesn't have one. When Hurricane Sandy came, they made everybody turn off their water systems. You know, Newark still had enough water to feed people for 10 days before we turned our water system back on to be able to use, and we gave water to other municipalities as well. That's how big our water system is and how valuable it is. We're
Right.
the only major city in the state of New Jersey who actually owns and operates its own water system.
So only.
The
Major.
only major city in the state that owns and operates its own water system. So you understand the value of that and why people have been very interested in managing it or getting a hold of it, because we control the distribution of water in this area.
Right.
Like not only just to us, but to towns that don't look like us as well. So we you know, control the distribution of water in some aspects to those towns.
Right.
The city has 18,000 lead service lines. About 14,000 of them are in the affected area. So 14,000 homes
Right.
are in the affected area, which is about 25–30% of maybe the population of the city. So when people say Newark has a water problem, without proper context,
Right.
it makes it appear like everybody who turns on their faucet,
Right.
lead is coming out the other
Right.
end. That's just not a fact.
Right.
So everybody don't. There are people on the same block who turn on their faucet, and one may have lead and one may not.
Right.
It's those nuances you have to explain and get into with folks. And it's difficult to do that through letters and mails and this, you have to have like a face-to-face long discussion with
Right.
people sometimes, answering questions to get them to figure out what exactly is happening or what's going on.
Right.
People use the headlines to do this, to do that, to say all kinds of things. And we have been, you know, desperately trying to get the message to the right people about even us giving out water and filters, like, because we don't have an overabundance of them, we want to give it out to the people who actually need them first.
Right.
I think that's crucial. And the court, which is not being talked about a lot, we actually won that part of the argument in court, which was we don't have to give filters and water to everybody in the city because everybody in the city don't need it.
Right.
Right, and that there are folks in the East Ward or other parts of the town where the corrosion control is working and they don't need any water. And the argument was about, are we turning people away? Now we give people water who come, but at the end of the day, those people might not need any water.
Right.
And part of it that's being missed is when the water is not being used, it loses its disinfectants, right? It evaporates while it's stagnant in the water, which is the problem that Flint had. The water became toxic because it was not being used.
Okay.
And so, you know, our water at the height of this thing, use dropped down to 20%. Less than what it's usually been used.
Okay.
We're at about 10% now, so people are beginning to use the water again.
Right.
But that poses a problem for us. It also inhibits us from getting the new chemical in the water,
Right.
so that it can begin to reduce the lead level. So
Right.
this kind of panic and scare that people are putting out there, believe that they're helping people. Even folks who with good intention in the street just passing water out, it's really not a good thing to do.
Right. Right.
It's like giving people antibiotics who don't need it.
Right.
People are sick, you passing out antibiotics,
Right.
and you see them give, I want some too.
Right.
And now you're making yourself immune to the cure in the first place.
Right.
And so even you giving out water, you shouldn't be. Right? People need to use their water because the usage of the water keeps it moving. It helps the disinfectant stay in the water.
Right.
Helps the phosphate flow in the water.
Right.
So it's actually a health issue not to use the
Right.
water.
Right.
Yeah.
talking a little bit more currently about like the things that you've been putting in place. I know you have an announcement that you're gonna make today. The most recent announcement was the effective rate,
Right.
the 97 to 99% effectiveness of the filters.
Right.
But can you talk more about like what's been going on the city's end of it in terms of like you passing ordinance or you're
Yeah.
introducing ordinance? Is that passed yet or is it almost passed?
Today, it should be passed today.
Okay. But you introduced the ordinance. And can
No,
you kind of
tomorrow,
expound on?
excuse me, tomorrow.
Okay.
Should be passed tomorrow. Today is a pre-council meeting. And the ordinance allows for us to go on people's property, particularly those renters, and change those lead service lines when we can't get in touch with the property owner.
Right.
Right. Because the lead service lines belong to the homeowner.
Right.
It doesn't belong to the city.
Right.
And what people don't know is in 2017, we began fighting to change the lead service lines. Right. So the minute we got an exceedance and we couldn't figure out what it was, we automatically went to the governor and said, listen, we want to change these lead service lines.
Right.
How do we get this done? And the first answer was you can't do it because they're not yours.
Right.
And you can't use public money to do it.
Right.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
So you either sit there like, oh, wait a minute, we stuck.
Right.
So we had to get the legislator to change the law
Right.
to amend it so that we could do it, to give us permission and say, look, give them permission to change the lead service line. And then when they did that, they said, okay, you have permission, but the homeowners still have to pay for it. Right? They still have to pay.
Right.
And so we took some more months struggling with them about, we don't want them to pay. We want to pay 90, they pay 10, and can the state subsidize that loan? And we got them to do that over an 8-year period. And this stuff takes long, and there's a lot of money. This is why Flint is still changing lead service lines 5 years later. We would have been in that position as well, because we would have been changing lead service lines based on the state's timeline of them giving us money. But it took us maybe 8 or 9 years to get it done.
Okay.
Which is why the new $120 million is significant, because it shortens that tremendously.
Right. And we can talk about the announcement.
Yeah.
So today, or recently, you guys put it out that with this new deal with the Port Authority,
Right.
the leasing of the land for the Port Authority,
Yeah.
the 30-year, $155 million, with $5 million coming up front.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about why this deal is, like, what makes this deal different from, had they just, signed a new contract to release land? Like, what about this is different in the structure?
Yeah.
And how you're using that difference to make a change?
Well, we have been, so I want people to know we've been negotiating with the Port Authority, or struggling with them, I should say, for the last 3 or 4 years of my administration, probably forever in the city. Governments, our city has been struggling with them over disputes we have over the lease.
Right.
And we've been going back and forth, and by the grace of God, we are able to settle these disputes at this time, right? And obviously, the information that we've gotten and us going back and forth, we thought it advantageous to close this deal now, because it allows us to use the money for whatever we want to use it for, and we're going to obviously use it to help pay down the debt that we just borrowed. So we had a dispute over Port Street, which is the street that goes into Port Authority.
Yep.
They wanted to take Port Street. Actually had to go down to the Port Authority meeting and tell them, you guys are not taking Port Street. It doesn't belong to you. And if you try to do that, we're going to put trucks on it, and you can't do anything.
Right.
So we actually had a real dispute about that.
Yeah.
And, so that was one of the things. The other things were about lease payments. The other, so it was a whole series of things. And so they needed some stuff. We needed some stuff. We decided to, settle this. And they've been good, I should say, over the last couple of months. Really trying to hammer this thing out with us. And so they get to use Port Street now. They get to make the upgrades that they want to make on it, widen it, make it safer for their trucks, easier to get in and out of the port without the city's interference.
Right.
We get a port administrator that they pay for, airport and seaport administrator, to oversee their transactions and other things that they're doing that we believe in the past we didn't have access to.
Got it.
They get to extend the lease 10 years, and we have agreed to deal with the lease as it is for 10 years, going forward. So what it does is precludes me
Mhm.
from tomorrow saying, oh, I have another issue with the port.
Okay.
I need X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
But I only agreed to do that for 10 years.
Right.
Because I didn't want to handicap anybody that comes after me.
Right.
Because the issues are still going to be the issues
Right.
when I leave office. So the next person just got to take up the fight the same
Right.
way I took it up and get more stuff, you know. But that's basically what the agreement turned out to be.
Yeah.
And it's going to be beneficial for us because we're going to use it. I mean,
Mhm.
it's no secret.
Right.
We're going to use it for the Port Authority.
Right.
For these lease payments.
Right.
Excuse me, the debt
The
service.
water,
yeah,
yeah.
the debt service.
So I want to make sure we don't forget. Tomorrow, there's going to be a state of the water address at NJPAC, but preceding that is a health fair. Right.
Outside.
Yeah. So that's like open to the public, and you guys, there's going to be, you know, testing and information and giving out filters.
Right.
Can you just talk a little bit about that and, like, you know, why that's so important? I have my own point of view on it, but
Right. I think it's important to give people information
Yeah.
and give them access to things. And I think one of the criticisms that I have is that, you know, we have to get everything out to people as clear
Mhm.
as we can, as
Mhm.
many times as we can, and not take for granted that once we do a thing 2 or 3 times that it's picking up the amount of people that
Right.
we need to pick up. So I think that's important,
Mhm.
and to make people understand that we actually care about the folks of the city, and
Right.
we care about their families, and
Right.
we want to make sure that they have access to health care and all these other kind of things.
Mhm.
And how to use the filters.
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know. So that's important, right?
Yeah.
People have to learn how to use them properly.
I think just to, you know, speak from my perspective a little bit, it's so important that the information is shared. I think what kind of compounds that was even more important is creating opportunity for folks to actually engage once they have information, right?
Right.
And, you know, having the health fair before, not that this is the intent at all, but
Yeah.
we know that there are going to be folks who come just so that they can shout and complain and you know,
Absolutely.
whatnot. But having the health fair in advance, it gives people the opportunity to actually be informed, get filters if they need filters, get tested, you know, do all these things in advance. So you can't complain about what the city's not doing
Right.
once just because there's a microphone in your hand. You know, there's been a lot of work put up for not only informing folks on what's going
Yeah.
on, but also giving folks more and more access to being engaged.
Yeah.
Because this is not, it's not a municipality issue, it's not a Newark issue, it's not a New Jersey issue, it's a nationwide issue.
Yeah.
But it's an issue that we all have to participate in solving. We can't just, you know, sit back and rely on,
Yeah.
well, the mayor's got to do it all,
Yeah.
or the governor's got to do it all, or whoever's got to do it all. You know what I mean?
Well,
We all
next
have to
couple
do
months and years, people will begin to see how it affects the country. I think this is
Yeah.
going to be a national issue
Yeah.
fairly soon.
Have you been getting calls from other cities on like how to solve, like, 'cause they know that
Yeah.
this
I
is not
mean,
just a no problem.
Probably Kadeem and the water department.
Mhm.
Kadeem has been getting a lot of calls
Okay.
from water purveyors and,
Yeah.
and water folks about how to deal with this. And one of the problems that people are having is that, and so because we own the stuff, we can do what we want,
Right.
right? We can change our own lead service lines,
Mhm.
and we could take a bond out and pay the debt service. A private company that owns your water system
Right.
is not going to pay to fix your pipes.
Right.
They're going to make you pay for it,
Right.
or it's not going to get done.
Right.
Right. That's basically what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. Or they're going to pay for it and then put it in your water bill.
Yeah.
Which is what's what's happening across the state. And so now people are saying they don't want to pay because Newark is getting it done for free.
Right.
Right. And so you got a lot of electeds and even private folks who are a little nervous
Mhm.
about how we moving
Right.
in the city of Newark because they're afraid that we're setting precedent in terms of how to address this issue when they don't want to address it because
Right.
it's just too costly.
Right. Gotcha. I know you got somewhere you got to get to.
Yeah.
You got another announcement coming up, but thank you for your time.
No problem.
Appreciate you coming through. Next
Yeah.
time you come through, we can talk about some more fun things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to be back, man.
Appreciate it.
All right.